Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa McAllister, and you're listening to The Melissa Made Show. Now, for decades, I've dedicated myself to helping women break the cycle of dieting, navigate through all the fads, and change their lives through my nutrition coaching. Now, each week, I'm going to talk about everything from deep nutrition, mindset, self-care, the ideal workout routine, tips on how and why to implement intermittent fasting in your life, my favorite recipes that are not only crowd pleasers, but they're actually healthy for you, and so much more. Now, with small and consistent changes, you can defy aging while living a happier, healthier, and more heart-filled life. I'm so excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are so simple to adopt. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Melissa Made Show. So, deep breath. I have been looking forward to this podcast for a very, very, very long time. To me, I was thinking to myself, if you're political, for me, this is like interviewing a former or current president. If you're my husband and you're into motocross, it's like interviewing Ricky Carmichael or Jeremy McGrath, if you even know who those names are, but they're huge in the motocross world. So for me, being the health and wellness person that I am, I've got my pinnacle on my podcast, and this just means the world to me. So I'm going to give her probably not a due justice introduction, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into this because I literally have a lot of questions to ask her. Very excited to have the opportunity to pick her brain. So I wanted to welcome you guys to the Melissa Made Show and let you know that I'm beyond thrilled to introduce someone who's not only been a powerhouse in the health and wellness world, but she's also a woman who embodies the strength and tenacity that we all inspire to be. Today, we have with us a fitness rock star, a nutritious genius, and a business master who's launched not one, not two, but 3 multi-million-dollar businesses. And I'm talking about a woman who's written 4 New York Times bestsellers, who's been a friendly face on our TV for a long time, and whose podcasts have reached millions of ears. We're talking 18 million to be exact. And this has been around the world. And above all, she's a woman who's shown us that true meaning of bravery and resilience. So get comfy and get ready to be probably the most inspired you've ever been on this podcast. I would love to introduce to you guys my guest, the one, the only JJ Virgin. Thank you so much for being on here today.
Well, thank you. That was wow. That was a great introduction. I really
good. I'm glad.
I've been called an aerobics instructor. That is the craziest introduction ever. I was sitting here listening, and the person goes, "And now I want to introduce you to our next speaker. She's an aerobics instructor." And I went, "What?" Yeah, 35 years ago I was. Okay. I'm like, did we call you the bank teller or hostess or waiter,
Oh my God, I love
college degree? Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. And like I was telling you before we started, that you've been a huge inspiration for me because I have been in the health and wellness space for 30 something years. And I started off as a group exercise instructor as well. And I will be 50 years old in 2 months. And
nice.
So,
it's the best thing ever, turning 50 plus. You'll wish you'd done it sooner.
I really, really hope so. There's that little voice in my head that's like, you've only got 2 months left. You've only got 6 weeks left. You've only got...
And then you get to be 50. Lucky, lucky, lucky you. Let's reframe all of that because it's a choice and a decision. Like it like literally, you know, if I could have turned 50, if I could have had the mindset and the knowing and all of the stuff of 50 at 20, I would have like whatever I needed to do to get there. And 60s even more so.
Oh, so. You know, I am going to pick your brain about mindset because I think you're one of the most powerful women when it comes to the idea of mindset. But I wanted to first kind of, if you wouldn't mind really quick, kind of sharing with my audience, the probably 2 that may not know you real well, how you got started in this industry.
There wasn't an industry when I got started. There was no industry. That is what is so funny about all this. I grew up in the Bay Area of Northern California, And I wanted to be a theater actress, a musical theater actress. I cannot sing. And I'm not really a very good actress either. But nevertheless, I really thought that I was going to be great at this. And so I grew up, in acting school at ACT in San Francisco, taking dance classes every day and taking singing lessons. And so because of that, I looked at my body purely as an instrument.
Wow.
And, in order to do, I was ballet and tap. Now I'm 6 feet tall. So it was absolutely ridiculous that I was doing ballet dancing. But I started studying nutrition at 12. I went to the library and I started reading books and I started like evaluating everything, which drove my Midwestern mother crazy because she was the tuna fish casserole with like, potato chips on top person.
You have the same mother?
I know, right? And, served Pop-Tarts for breakfast. And I mean, literally, I grew up on Pop-Tarts, Captain Crunch, these casseroles, Wonder Bread and bologna sandwiches, all this garbage, right? And at 12, I revolted. I started studying. I started counting everything I was eating. I started like putting together my own calisthenic exercise routines. I started teaching calisthenics in high school. That's what we had then. We did not have, I was teaching dance class. There was, I think, jazzercise at the local Y rec center. And when I went off to UCLA on a theater scholarship. And when I went off to UCLA, there was a little aerobics studio down in Westwood. And so I went down there and I went to take a class. The instructor didn't show up, so I taught the class. And then I ended up running the studio. And then someone called up the studio because they wanted someone to come to their house and do private lessons. And so I ended up doing that. And so with that, I became a personal trainer. As far as I can tell, it was me and Body by Jake and Mark Sisson. This was literally in the early 80s. Oh. And so by the time I graduated UCLA, I had like a full-blown business. Everyone was going off to get these horrible jobs, having to wear like suits and sit in an office and make like a quarter of what I was making. And meanwhile, I was paying my way through grad school, like just working all the time, but loving everything that I was doing. So it just was never, there was never a time I wasn't into this, but there also, when I was first starting, there was really not an industry. I mean, the first health club started, it was crazy. I was an aerobics director for like one of the first health clubs in LA, Matrix, it was right.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was with 24-hour fitness for, 15 years, I think it was. And your story is actually very parallel to mine. I'm of course very inspired by that. Loving how you were kind of just thrown into the mix of that industry, as I feel like I kind of was too, but it was the best decision that I ever made, and has obviously been lucrative in and of itself, because people always need to take care of themselves, but also the friendships that you make and the things that you learn and the way you're able to help yourself and help family if they'll.
I just don't understand why you'd want to do anything else, know? So, I mean, for me, back then, people would hire a personal trainer purely for aesthetics, vanity, right? I mean, we've changed so much, thankfully, and I would be called a health nut and a health freak. Remember that? Like, I'm like, why is that a bad thing? Why would that be a bad thing? And so I just never, this was all I was ever interested in was health, fitness. Like I kind of ran out of classes in exercise physiology. Like I was all the way up getting a PhD in exercise science, and there was a nutrition class. And then I was like, oh my gosh, because I was taking classes literally at USC in the dental department because I'd run out of classes day. And so I got very, very into nutrition, and I got into found functional medicine, and it just goes, but I'm just like, there's always more to learn. Every day I feel like I know less, not more. I'm more excited about what's going on now than I've ever been. I think it's, and it's also a great time to be 40 plus, because what we now know is so amazing. I'm literally in the best shape of my life at 60. I'm stronger, I'm fitter, and it's not like I was never fit and all of a sudden I got fit. Right. So, it's just really cool, cool industry, really fun. And I'm more excited about it now than I've ever been.
I love that. I love that. And your arms are to die for.
Number one question I get asked, and you know what drives me crazy about that? So the number one question I get asked is, how do you get those arms? And then right alongside it, the person will say, but I don't want to get big or bulky. I just want them to be toned. I want to have long, lean muscles. I go, what is that?
Yes.
What is that? I don't define what is a toned muscle. It's, you want to build muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll have tone, like Absolutely. In 40 years of doing this, and you probably will, say the same. I've never had a woman get bigger lifting weights.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
No, never has happened ever. Nope. Now, I don't do bodybuilding contests with people where they're taking anabolic steroids. So that would be a different situation. But right. In the normal population, if you are lifting weights, muscles are metabolic spanks and they hold everything in tighter, support your metabolism, and then act like a sugar sponge to help give carbohydrates a better place to land than in your belly and in your belly fat, right? So, but it is funny because whenever I get asked that, the second part is, but I don't want to get big. I'm like, yeah. All right, well, the only way I know you're going to get big is if you sit on the couch and eat ultra-processed food.
Right, absolutely. So in the introduction, I mentioned that you have written 4 books that I have really
I've written 6 books.
6 books.
I've written 6 books. I have 4 that are New York Times bestsellers, and I have 1 in the works right now that's going to be my big book.
Really?
My last book. I always say this is my last book. My legacy book is in the works. Because I wrote 6 Weeks of Sleeveless and Sexy was my first book, and then Warrior Mom. But I'm writing a book now on powerful aging.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. I'm very excited about that for both personal and for client reasons. Mm-hmm. But if we can talk about, I would love to just dive into a little bit about these books, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
You have a book called The Virgin Diet, which I love.
Which I had to fight for that name.
Oh, I bet.
I bet. It's ridiculous. It's like, it's my name. They're like, you can't call it that. No one, the TV stations won't want to cover that, called that. I go, it's my name. And then I got a cease and desist from Richard Branson's team on my products called The Virgin Diet. I'm like, it's my name. It's like,
well, that's funny. I didn't.
Not really. It's not really funny.
Yeah, he's a pretty big guy to go up against, I guess.
Yeah, they're like, you can fight that. It's your name. I go, it's Richard Branson.
Yeah.
No thanks. I'll just. It's fine. We're all good.
So you talk about dropping 7 foods to drop 7 pounds in 7 days. So can you give us kind of a little bit of a highlight of that book and what you mean by 7 pounds? And
here's the thing. Let's be honest about 7 pounds. When you're losing something like this, it's because you are deflating. You're getting rid of a lot of inflammation quickly. You don't lose 7 pounds of fat in a week. You might lose 1 or 2 pounds of fat in a week if you're lucky. You might put on a pound of muscle in a month if you're lucky. So this is because in that first week, a lot of things are shifting. So the way this book came to be was I had written a course for doctors called Overcoming Weight Loss Resistance. I was teaching it all around the country. Part of that, there was a lab test I was using, and I was working with a lab company incorporating these labs into the program. And there was a lab test that helped you identify your food sensitivities. These are not allergies. These are intolerances or sensitivities that happen due to your gut becoming more permeable or leaky. Back then, no one knew what this was. I think everybody knows leaky gut now, which can happen because of stress. That's the most common one. But, antibiotics, anything that can disrupt your gut microbiome. Fructose can make your gut more permeable. Gluten can make your gut more permeable. Pain medications can make your gut more permeable. So it's kind of like, who doesn't have some gut permeability, right? And what happens is, if you're eating the same foods, you have your small intestine. Right below that small intestine, like the single layer, right below that layer is your immune system. Now, for most of us, 35 plus, we're also, not only do we have leaky gut, we have lower stomach acid than we should. We're not digesting our food as well as we could be. And we tend to eat the same things all the time, especially if we're eating anything close to like processed food, standard American diet. And when you're eating these foods, they aren't getting broken down as well as they could, they go through your stomach, they land in your small intestine, and then particles pass through those junctions that should be tight, that have loosened up, and then land into your immune system that goes, what is this? Sees it as an invader, not a friend, sees it as a foe, and launches an immune attack by pumping out these antibodies. So you've got the antigens from the proteins of these foods that these antibodies grab a hold of, and they form immune complexes. Now, if this was just a little bit here and there, your body gets rid of those. But when you're doing this all the time, these build up and they start to create these symptoms like gas and bloating, joint pain, headaches, fatigue, skin problems. And one of the big ones is you start to crave those very foods that are hurting you because your body is smart and gets used to this and goes, I'm just going to have these antibodies ready for this. So bring it on. And so all of a sudden you're going, gosh, I got to have some cheese. And I say that because it's always the dairy. It's like dairy. Yeah. When I started and I wouldn't have known this, but I was doing this food sensitivity testing and the same foods always showed up. The top two were dairy and eggs, and the next tier were corn, peanuts, and soy. Gluten was a different type of test. And obviously sugar and artificial sweeteners, which I put in, those are the 7, disrupt your gut microbiome. Fructose can make your gut more permeable. Artificial sweeteners can do some shifts in your gut microbiome as well. So what I started to do, I would send people out for this test. It took 3 weeks for the test to come back. And so since I knew this information, I was like, well, why don't we just start to pull the foods out that are most common while you're waiting for the test results. I finally realized I actually didn't need to do the test, that basically you could figure it out by doing it without the test. And in the first week, especially people who've been eating a lot of these foods and a lot of ultra processed foods, they drop so much inflammation so quickly, which is what the 7 pounds represents. Maybe you lose 2 pounds of fat, but you're not losing 7 pounds of fat. I just want to be really clear about that. But what happens is you debloat, you drop a lot of inflammation. A lot of those things that you thought were just normal for you, like the headaches, the fatigue after eating, the gas and bloating, go away. And you're like, wow. Right. And so you go through a couple of weeks of this, the weight loss, one woman was so disappointed because she lost like 10 pounds the first week and she expected this to happen every week. And I go, first of all, there'd be nothing left of you in, a couple months. But second of all, no, that was just your body making that first shift. And now it's going to get to more of a normal fat loss, which is what you want. Right. But what happens after the course of a couple of weeks is you've given your body time to start to clear things out, to start the healing process. Depending on how damaged your gut is, that could take months. And to get rid of those antibodies and immune complexes so that you basically will unmask this sensitivity so that when you go back and try the food, dairy, eggs, soy, corn, peanuts, gluten, that you'll be able to go, how do I feel when I do this? Like, I know that if I eat gluten, I can feel it. My fingers the next day, I'm like, I got glutened, and so, it's like when I first started eating eggs again, I can now tolerate eggs, but it took me months of healing my gut. The first time I did it, horrible stomach pain. So because your body now doesn't have what it needs in there, those low-grade symptoms that you've gotten used to that you thought were normal now become a like five-star alarm that you're like, oh, okay. And so you can use your own body as and be your own detective to really see which foods work for you and which foods don't. And then you just keep those foods out. You keep them out for at least a couple months. You heal your gut, you re-challenge. I think most people are better off without gluten. Part of it's from the glyphosates that naturally come along with gluten in our country because our wheat's so sprayed, but also because gluten does start to loosen up those tight junctions. So I'm not a big gluten fan in the first place. I think some people can tolerate, sourdough bread because the gluten levels are way down, but yeah, and it's just a matter of whether you'll start being able to eat things like pastured eggs or I'm not a fan of corn either because it's a GMO crop. Same with soy. And the bottom line is, I think part of the reason that diet works so well too is what we now know about ultra processed food and what it does to your body, which is wild. I mean, how it impacts your body storing of visceral adipose tissue, how it actually lowers the thermic effect of food, how it increases your hunger. So a big thing is if you pull out gluten, dairy, eggs, corn, soy, peanuts, and sugar and artificial sweeteners, it's very hard to eat ultra processed foods. Yeah. Good luck, right? Like you just took out most of them.
Yeah. So it's a great segue for me because in another book you wrote the sugar impact diet. So you bring clarity to many questions about sugar, in my opinion, in that book. And there's a lot to unpack. And you kind of touched on them, but can you, for somebody listening that says, well, how much sugar can I have in my diet? Is there any kind of, do you have any kind of range? I mean,
So I never thought I would be writing a book about sugar. I'll be really honest. The only reason I wrote that book was after the Virgin Diet. People had so many questions about sugar, and I realized, holy smokes, they are so confused. They're like, but honey's natural.
right.
I'm like, arsenic's natural. That's like, I don't understand that reasoning. Or they're like, but they don't have any calories, so it's fine. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, that's not really what the research is showing. So I thought, you know what, we really need to help people understand that while all carbohydrates, except for fiber, some parts of fiber, turn into sugar, we really want to look at how do we make sugar slowly from the foods we eat rather than mainline it. There is a huge difference. You can say, oh, it all turns to sugar, but I'm sorry, there's a huge difference between a Skittle, and grapes. There just are. So, the first part I look at is really we're looking at how many carbs should you have?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that you have to have protein and fat to survive. You can live without carbs. Doesn't mean you should. Just means that our body is hardwired to survive if we are in a time when there's no carbs around.
Mm-hmm.
But we will not survive without water. We won't survive without protein, and we won't survive without fat. And the reality is, where we do have a storage unit for fat, we have no storage for protein. We'd have to take it from our muscles, which is devastating and the last thing you want to do.
Yeah.
So, and carbs, of course, we can take protein and turn it into sugars. We can go use ketones. So we can have other fuel sources, because really fats and carbs are fuel. Protein are building blocks. That's what you want to think of. And while protein can be used for fuel, that's not really what you want to use it for.
Right.
So in looking at all of that, then all carbs turn to sugar, but we want to make them, not mainline them. What does that mean then if you want to have a piece of birthday cake, right? Or something of that? I always look at this and go, it would be like what I do with my kids. When my kids were little, I just taught my kids to eat the good stuff first. Kids are interesting. They're so different than adults. They get full and they stop eating. It's so weird. It's like so strange, and then if they overeat on sugar or something, they either get so hyped up they're impossible to be around, or they, like my son Bryce, overate on Easter eggs, threw up, and that was the end of it. And I was like, he'll never eat those again, will he? But it's really connecting the dots then and going, well, how do I feel? And that's what I did with Sugar Impact Diet. Is I looked at foods differently. I wanted to look at the insulin blood sugar response to a food, because there are certain things that might have a bigger insulin response than sugar response. So it's not all necessarily tied together. And there can be things that don't really have many calories that still can impact your insulin. So think about fructose, lower blood sugar response, bigger insulin response. So we have to look at blood sugar and insulin responses, but we also need to look at nutrient density and fiber. And so I looked on one side and went, how is this impacting blood sugar and insulin? And what is going on with fructose? Because fructose is different than the other sugars. It's metabolized differently, and we have to be careful with it, because the majority of it's going to go to the liver, where if it cannot be converted to glucose and then to glycogen and stored, it's going to be turned into making fat. And that is the last thing we want to make. And so fructose, we know, makes the gut more permeable. Fructose is a great way to induce hypertension in lab rats. So while eat fructose in a fruit, don't unwrap that fructose, turn it into juice and guzzle it down, right? And certainly don't go have crystalline fructose because someone told you at a lower glycemic index, or do agave syrup because it's supposedly is healthier for you, because these are just basically all fructose. So I looked and I went, okay, how could we create a new rating scale? And, the biggest thing I would tell you with that book is there's still some revisions now that I would make if I was writing it again, because I would look at bananas and go, there's a big difference between a ripe banana and a barely ripe banana, right? I mean, a barely ripe banana I would put into the green foods, and a ripe banana would be in the red level. So you've got to look at and potatoes. There's a big difference between a French fry or potato chip or a potato that's been boiled and cooled because of the resistant starch levels. So that's what I was really working on, is to help you identify the green light carbohydrates that you want to be eating a lot of, non-starchy vegetables, 2 servings of fruit a day, and then look at where things are yellow and red. And so what I would do with people is have them first take a quiz to really figure out how sugar is impacting them, what's going on with their waistline, because this is a big contributor for visceral adipose tissue. And the great way to see that at home is just do a waist to height measurement. What's going on with their energy levels, their cravings. I find we can get rid of cravings pretty much by just eating protein first. And then once we've done this quiz, I have them look at their current diet and look at how many foods they're eating that are more red and yellow levels of sugar impact carbs. And we just start to taper. Because one of the things I see people do wrong when they're trying to get rid of their sugar cravings is they try to go cold turkey. If you want to get rid of your sugar cravings, the easiest thing to do is eat protein first, and to taper down from higher sugar impact carbs down to low sugar impact carbs. So if you were eating potato chips, eat, cold potato. Yeah. Totally different thing. And you can even bake potatoes in thicker potato chips and let them cool and eat those. Completely different impact on your body. Instead of eating raisins, switch to grapes, and even better than grapes, switch to blueberries, so simple stuff. Instead of having orange juice, have an orange, right? So it was just to help people really understand the better choices, but then also to take all the fructose out for at least a week, let your body do a reset, get your taste buds to hear things again, because one of the challenge with a lot of these artificial sweeteners and fructose is that things are hyper sweet now, and the more sweet we eat, the more we tend to want. There's also a genetic issue that people have where they'll have a sweet tooth or be a sweet taster. And so that will just kind of light them up and they'll want more and more and more. It triggers the pleasure centers in the brain. Mm-hmm. So basically we kind of shut that thing down, get people eating savory and spicy and eating more protein, and then come back and re-challenge. And people start to really realize that things just taste too sweet, that they feel crappy when they eat the higher sugar impact foods, and they connect the dots. Mm-hmm. And then they go, yeah, no, I really don't want that. Or if I'm going to go somewhere and it's my birthday, I'll have 3 bites of cake and then I'm cool, Yeah.
Do you believe in the thought process of, because we have all of those different, the mapping of the tongue, and bitter is one of them, and something that most people, because they don't have enough bitter food in their diet, they don't like the taste of bitter food, talking about spinach or even black coffee. And that by having them reintroduce bitter back into their diets, they're going to get used to it and actually start to enjoy it, which is kind of where I feel like, my clients are like, I can't do black coffee. And I'm like, well, maybe you can, if you just
don't let it sit for a while. So I'm a super taster.
Okay.
So I don't like bitter. And that is that super taster gene.
Yes.
I don't like bitter. Like when I did Freaky Eaters, I actually brought that testing in. Because they were like, I was like, there's clearly something going on here, because and you have taste receptors all the way down. I remember we tried to get this gal, she loved French fries. I go, let's take her to one of those places where they like deep fry everything, and we'll just get vegetables in that way to get it, at least taste them. And she was like gagging all the way down. I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. Ran out crying. I mean, it made for great TV, but she was clearly a super taster. Yeah. And the thing is, you can drink black coffee. You just can't do a French press and let it sit for 30 minutes because it will get super bitter and you'll hate it. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's ways around that you can have someone do, but bitter tasters, I mean, there is a genetic component.
Yeah. And do you know how big that is? Is that pretty minute in people, or because now I can see my clients going, see, I told you. And I'm like, well,
It's a genetic test. I used to do this very cool thing. I don't know if they're still around. Pathway Genomics had a pathway fit test, and part of it, they would tell you that. Most people know if they are, but here's the thing. That doesn't give you license to like live on cake and cookies. Yeah. That just says, hey, like if you're going to drink coffee, I do better with an Americano than a French press. Like you just know the things that you'll like better. There's certain things that I'm just like, ugh, I'm never going to have that. That's just blech, you know? And there is something too, the thing I always say with kids is just keep trying it with them and trying that with them. Like the first time I drank green tea, I go, well, this tastes just like
Same.
gross. This is like pee. Fortunately, I was living in Japan, so I didn't have any options. To get a cup of coffee in Japan was like really difficult. So a little while into it, I got used to green tea. So I do think you just keep trying and trying and trying. And that comes from that mindset of and I think of a mentor I had who would always say, just put so I don't have to, like a bratty little kid after what you just said, I'm a bitter taster, so I don't have to eat that healthy thing. Or you could just decide, what can I do to be able to eat those healthy things? What can I do to make myself like that thing? Now, there might be certain things that no matter what you do, it's like yuck. Like cilantro to me is a yuck. I'm not going to eat cilantro. But there's other things that you can do that you can replace that, right? So it's the bigger question of, what are you looking to do? Because all people come to me and go, I want to lose body fat, and I'd like to, tone up. But I don't want to change my diet, and I can exercise once a week. I go, cool. When you figure out how to do that, let me know and I'll hire you to teach everybody, because I don't have a clue for you. I think we need to readjust your goals. So, right?
I love that. Yeah. So, I think we kind of stand on the same platform with this, but can you share with my audience your thoughts on snacking, what you feel snacking fits into our daily regimen?
It's so funny. I was just looking at some interview questions for an interview I'm doing, and they want to know healthy snacks. I go, do they know who they're talking to here? Like, water?
Water.
Well, it fits into this whole idea. I like to say we need to eat by the plate and eat by the clock. And all this talk about intermittent fasting. And then I'll ask them, well, what do you consider intermittent fasting to be? And they'll go, a 12-hour fast. I go, or isn't that just normal eating?
Thank you.
Like when I grew up, you got up in the morning, you ate breakfast before you left for school. So maybe an hour and a half after you got up, and you had lunch at school. You came home. Maybe if you'd done a lot of sports, you had a snack before dinner. I'd always have to come home because my mom had dinner so late. She'd have it at 7, and I would have done athletics all day long. So I would sneak in the kitchen and have to get a snack. But generally, maybe you'd need that, but likely you don't. You have a little earlier dinner, and then you shut the kitchen down. And that should give you a nice 12 to 14 hours. And that shouldn't be counted as a fast. That's counted as normal behavior.
Are you ready to learn the secret behind how I continue to be so healthy? Well, it all comes down to science. If you've been listening to my show for a while now, you may have heard me mention something called the MAID diet. Yes, that's right, because I'm so passionate about how learning about the effects that nutrition has on the human body, I always seek to learn as much as I can and apply that knowledge. One of my best learning tools has been self-experimentation. And now in my late 40s, I have to say, I've done a pretty good job. It's hard to find trustworthy, even accurate information in this country. Between the influence of big corporations with monetary agendas, the nutrition labels designed to deceive, and downright misleading information that you were taught in school, navigating food and nutrition with your optimum health in mind can be quite challenging. Take the food pyramid, for example. In an ideal world, I'm sure we would all love to eat pasta and baguettes for every meal, but that's simply not what's best for our bodies, our health, and our longevity. Now, I spent years developing the MAID diet in a way that I wish someone had taught me, and I break it all down in my MAID diet course. People are always asking me what I eat, so we start there. What I eat in a day and which foods are the most beneficial. So think something in between the Mediterranean and the paleo diet. It's a lifestyle plan that incorporates moderate protein, adequate fat, decreased carbs, and an introduction to intermittent fasting. But please, I want you to keep in mind, just because I say decrease carbs, I don't mean decrease carbs in what your body needs. I just mean decrease carbs in what the standard American diet has become. You still get plenty of quality carbohydrates, just not in the mass amounts we have been eating to get us into such an unhealthy state. And of course, we're going to talk about what foods to avoid, because that's just as important. We even talk about how to eat healthy on the go, because let's face it, we're busy and that's just life. And then there's intermittent fasting. I share all of my favorite tips and tricks, and a lot of science are along the way. I could not say enough good things about intermittent fasting, and I'm honestly so surprised more people are doing it. You'll also learn how I've learned to balance my hormones and feel my best, because so many women struggle with this. And lastly, we cover the mindset behind making a change, because we all know that your mindset is the key to your success in anything that you do. So if you are struggling with diet in terms of feeling your best, or you are ready to take your health to the next level, I strongly recommend you check out this course. Now, the course is structured in 5 modules, 16 lessons, and a whole lot of research to back everything up. So I want you to visit my website, themaidediet.com or melissamade.com, and you will see a tab for the course. Click on that to get access today and learn why you should be eating this way too.
And when I think about it, and you're younger than me, so maybe you missed this horrific time in our history when we decided that if we just got fat down as low as possible. I was actually training people out of Pritikin Gym in the Palisades at the time. So, this was like the epicenter of going low fat, and they were like 10% of your calories from fat. You could have fish twice a week. That was it. Totally plant-based other than that. Right. Wow. I mean, brutal. I was starving all the time. And I was training people all day long, running with them, so I literally would bring coolers of carbs with me. And I was hungry all the time. And that's where all the stupid snacking came from. If you eat by the plate, you eat protein first because it's got the best thermic effect and it's most satiating. It's going to help with blood sugar balance. All the talk about eating vegetables first for blood sugar balance. Eat protein does the same thing, and you'll make sure you got your protein in, because most women are getting half of what they need. And then you add your non-starchy vegetables. You have some healthy fats, maybe a little low carbs if you need them. And I do carbs at about 100 grams. The more than that you need to earn. 2 fruits a day. That's it. Like, this is not hard, and you're not hungry. When you eat protein, fat, and fiber together, you've got this beautiful satiety trifecta, and you aren't hungry. If you're hungry 2 to 3 hours after you ate, you either you didn't eat right. Something was wrong, right? Because you should be able to go 4 to 6 hours. You should be able to go, did I eat? And go and forget that you ate. Like, if you are living for your next meal, something is wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's really profound. And we talked earlier, so my audience knows I've had JJ scheduled for this podcast for a very long time.
Really?
She booked out a little bit. And
I know I travel all the time. That's why, and I don't like to do them from the road because they are crappy.
Well, worth the wait. But she was on when in one of my schoolings, Restoration Wellness Solutions. She was a guest on their podcast, and so I was telling her this. I got to just sit there and listen to her talk, and she actually talked to us a little bit more about business. You guys, she's an incredible business mentor above and beyond this wellness space. Incredible business mentor, but we're talking about that. And I really, really enjoyed Restoration Wellness and, of course, Margaret. And the reason I'm saying this is because you talk about eating protein first. And I always tell my clients as well, if you do, because it is very common to have that lower hydrochloric acid, to get that protein in first, because you're going to give, that's when your hydrochloric acid, it will be at its strongest. And it will also help you break apart that protein when it's one of the first things you eat versus one of the last things you eat, because you've had some glasses of water, you've had a lot of vegetables and all this stuff. And so your stomach's full, the hydrochloric acid is diluted, and then the protein doesn't get broken down like it should.
And then you feel like a snake. Well, and then there's the protein leverage hypothesis, which I think is so, like, the minute you hear it and you think of any time you've ever gone to a vegan restaurant where you overate and you still were hungry. And that protein leverage hypothesis that the bug researchers out of Australia discovered looking at locusts, and then went and found it in animals too, is that we will continue to eat. Like, if we are given a low protein diet that's more carbs and fat, which, by the way, is the obesogenic formula.
Mm.
low protein, high fat, high carbs.
Mm.
You will continue to eat till you get adequate amounts of the amino acids you need, which means you'll overeat to try to get the protein. So why not just not do that, and eat
Right.
protein first, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's so good for us. So just last week, I interviewed my own mother for this podcast. I have quite the story that I won't bore you with, but I think she's an exceptional mom. I know we all think that, but I also think you're an exceptional mom. And in your book, The Warrior Mom, you talk about a crisis that you went through with your son. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I was just curious if you would kind of touch on that, and I guess the power and the resilience that came out of that horrible scenario that made you an even better mom, I guess,
Well, I mean, I'm a good mom and I have an excellent, Grant's dad is amazing and we are incredible. We are not good married, but we are an amazing partnership for helping him. And his brother is incredible too. So it really takes a village with all of these things. And I think the bigger thing is and if anything, you look at over the last couple of years, what we've seen is we are going to be challenged. We don't know when, but so you always need to be ready, because you never know when that time's going to come when something may happen to you, to a loved one, and are you ready? And I just thank God that when this happened, it was a crazy time. It was a month before the Virgin Diet was being launched. So the craziest time ever. I'd invested all of my advance into making the book launch go, and I'd borrowed money. I'm the sole financial support for my kids. They were 15 and 16. And my son, I still remember Bryce coming running into the garage, my 15-year-old, telling me that our 16-year-old Grant had been hit by a car. I was in the garage doing burst training, HIT training. And Grant had been hit by a car and airlifted to the local hospital. And, I threw everything in a bag and drove to the hospital with my son, Bryce, trying to find out what the heck had happened, because the hospital was 30 minutes away and he was considered a John Doe and they wouldn't tell me a thing, which was crazy. And even when we walked into the hospital and John, Grant's dad, was with us too, they put us in a conference room. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then they finally took us to see Grant. They go, your son's been in a very serious accident. And sometime over the next 24 hours, he has a torn aorta, he has multiple brain bleeds, and he'd also had 13 fractures, but they weren't worried about that. That was like the least of it. And they said, sometime in the next 24 hours, if his aorta isn't repaired, every hour, the risk of it rupturing goes up 10%. And at some point in 24 hours, it will rupture. And I remember they took us to see him. He's, on a ventilator. He's got a tube coming out of his brain to manage the pressure. He's in a deep coma. He had literally had bones. And when you're in a situation like this, your brain protects you. My brain was like, movie, not real, right? I am like looking at this going, this could not, are those bones? And he literally had glass shining off his skin. He was covered in road rash. My son, Bryce, the 15-year-old, is like walking straight up to him going, dude, you got this. I'm like, who are you? He's like my 80-year-old in a 15-year-old body. Anyway, this doctor starts this whole thing of we can't do the surgery he needs here because it requires a blood thinner here and his brain will bleed out. But if we don't do the surgery, he's going to die, but he'll never survive the airlift to the next hospital. And even if he were to survive it, he won't survive the surgery. And even if he were to survive both of those, he would be so brain damaged, it wouldn't be worth it. So literally, and I saw the doctor's notes later, it was like, I'm advising them to let him go, really. And I'm looking at this doctor, and Bryce is looking at this doctor, and Bryce is like, it sounds like maybe a 0.0125% chance he'd make it. Now, Bryce is now getting a PhD in math. So he's just a math kid. So he's looking at this doctor, and, I taught my kids to respect, but challenge authority. So, doctor's looking at Bryce, and my ex-husband was a medical malpractice trial attorney. So we're all standing there looking at this doctor, and the doctor says, yeah, that sounds about right. And he goes, Bryce says, yeah, that's not zero. We'll take those odds. And the doctor is looking at us, and John Virgin goes, you're overruled.
I love that.
We're airlifting him. And thank God for this doctor at Harbor UCLA who at midnight accepted the case and recruited 5 surgical teams, got a hold of a stent that he wanted to use with Grant that was part of a study used with adults that was not even available, that he had airlifted from somewhere, that got there at 5 a.m. I drive through the night to get to the hospital, walk in, and this doctor, Dr. Carlos Donaire, is like, I got this. You don't even need to worry about this. I do this all the time. I'm like, who are you? Right. And so I go up and wait in the waiting room. He comes out, says, okay, it's fine. It's all fixed. Now, I don't know if he'll ever wake up. I'm just the plumber. And I'm like, you're like, oh my God. Right. And I go in to see Grant, and it was before he got transferred to the pediatric ICU. Harbor UCLA is a little rough. It's second biggest trauma center in the country, but it's in a little rough neighborhood. And there are literally people handcuffed to their beds and gunshot wounds. And he's in the corner, sun shining through him. And you can hear the machine breathing for him like Darth Vader, right? And there's like the beeping and the pressure on his brain being monitored. And there's like one finger that's not, like, he'd had 2 orthopedic teams working on him. He had, broken femur. I'm holding the one finger. And, Grant, I love you so much. And nothing, just beep, breath, right? And then I said, and your brother Bryce loves you so much. And I feel this faint little squeeze. And I'm thinking, I really got to go get sleep. Like, I'm hallucinating. But I thought maybe I'm not. And so I said, your grandmother loves you so much. Nothing. And then I said, your girlfriend Mackenzie loves you so much. She can't wait till she sees you again. And he tried to pull my finger off the bed. And I was like, and I don't even know where it came from. I'm like, Grant, your name means warrior. You got to fight. I got everything. You don't even need to worry. All I need to do is fight. I will bring everything in. You're going to be 110%, and I just, from that moment, I got this fixation, and I believe thoughts create. I would not allow anything in my head or any doctor around that couldn't see Grant better than he was before. In fact, like, these orthopedists came in because it's so interesting, when you have kids, like, the first time they hurt themselves and have a little bleed, you're like, oh my gosh. And now it's like, first it's a torn aorta. Okay, that's fine. Now he's in a coma. He's got to wake from, like, so the crushed heel he had, I'm like, it's a heel. Well, it turns out he had this crushed heel, and this heel was like, they're like, this is like a never walk again type of injury. This is a life-changing injury. I go, yeah, no. I go, I want you to pretend this is a star athlete here, because he will be, and he will be running again. So if you can't see that, we can't work together. And I think they're like, I think my ex-husband's the sweetest, most gentlest, most friendly human being ever. Like, everyone in that hospital is like, oh, good, he's here. I think I'd walk in there like, oh no, oh no, she's here, but we made a good team, because I was like, listen, either see him healed and work from that, or we are going to find somebody else, because, that's the way it goes. So we got everyone on board, and he's running and all of that. And, it's been a long, I remember a doctor telling me, when he wakes up, it'll be ugly. And I thought she meant like for, 5 minutes he'd yell. I didn't know that she meant for years, what it takes to come out of this. And I think the important thing here is, because, this is the thing you don't wish on anybody. And people say, I can't imagine. And I go, please don't ever imagine this. But what you do need to take from it is, the thing that I did to be able to pull through this was that I actually prioritized myself and self-care. I thought to myself that day after I told him he was going to be 110%, I'm like, oh, all right, now what? How am I going to do that? I've got to make this book go, because if the book doesn't go, I'll be bankrupt and I won't be able to pay for any of this. Yep. And so I just was like, I can't show up to the ICU with a sniffle. I have to be able to, I was doing interviews. UCLA hooked me up with a room so I could do interviews for my book. And, leave bedside, go in the room, go do interviews, come back. And so, I just got my sleep every night. I ran up and down the hospital stairs. I found a gym it was like less than half a mile away. I ate healthy. I figured I had no margin for error. And, when you think of this, because someone, when it happened, was like, oh, go get a pizza. I go, what? This is not the time to let defenses down. First of all, I wouldn't get a pizza anyway, but when you think about it, most people would have put themselves on the back burner, and then they would not have been able to show up strong and do what they needed to do. And so that's really the takeaway there is, and it was funny because I was supposedly writing and launching a diet book, and I realized how much bigger it was than that. This wasn't about a diet book. It was about how do you step into your healthiest self so that you're ready for whatever comes up, because I was ready when this thing hit. I was ready. I was resilient. I dealt with other bad things before. I was, knew how to handle stress, and I just put it all into place.
And so, I mean, it's almost like that, just a morning mindset. Wake up, be ready for anything, kind of don't put yourself on the back burner. Don't be prepared. Don't be making yourself stronger, both physically and mentally every single day, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
5 minutes.
Women put themselves on the back. I mean, this is, it's really interesting right now because my whole next thing is around powerful aging. And I'm choosing that word very specifically. Number one, because as we lose muscles, we age, we lose more strength, and the most we lose is power. But also because women in general, their whole lives, they're taught to become smaller, to shrink. And I'm like, let's take up space. Let's step up. Let's be strong. Let's be powerful. Oh, you might ruffle feathers and threaten some people. Do it with kindness and love. But, stop playing small in anything. And I think, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. You start lifting weights, you start getting stronger, you start showing up more powerfully, everything shifts, right?
Yeah. So that was going to be my last question for you, because I mean, you're really kind of, your social media and everything is phenomenal. And you're really focusing, what I'm saying is you're talking about perimenopause and menopausal women and helping them through, because I think I am going through perimenopause. If I am, I'm thank goodness, because I do put myself first. It's not too bad so far.
Yay!
I like my sisters, so, which is the reason I really started to put myself first. I was like, I don't want to go through what she's going through. But what advice do you have? My audience, of course, is a very large perimenopausal phase for them as they're entering into this phase, or they're in it, or they're menopausal. Is it too late? What's the
too late?
Well,
what too late?
For them, you hear this, and I don't agree with it, but it's just too late for me. Like my mother when she visited me, she was, she had a hard time getting off the floor, and I'm like, Mom, let's walk a little more, maybe pick up a couple little baby weights, and it's too late for me. I'm 70 years old, and I'm like,
oh my gosh, you know what? The best time to start, when I was 16, I started lifting weights in the high school gym with the football players. That was the best time to start. And the second best time to start is now. And I will tell you the thing that was so exciting when I was doing my doctoral work at USC. I'm a doctoral grad dropout. However, because I was like, I'm not spending this much money to take classes in a dental school. But I was doing nutrition, genetics, and exercise phys, right? So it was exercise science with aging and nutrition. And we had these master athletes. We had people coming in like in amazing shape in their 70s, 80s, 90s. And here's what's interesting. If you are 70 and starting or 80 and starting, you can get amazing gains. Like if you've never done it before, you'll be amazed at what you do. You want to do it correctly, because you don't want to get injured at this stage in the game. It can really set you, really cause problems. But that's why you work out. You don't train to get good at training. You train to get good at life. And that's what's going to keep you from getting injured in life. Like, why do people fall and break their hips 65 plus, and then 30% of them die within a year? They do that because they lost their power. But if they're doing things like bounding back and forth and getting up off the floor and doing little jumps in a gym, then they can correct themselves in life. And then they'll never have to be that person who at 80 or 90 has to call for help to get off the toilet. You look at it and go, where do I want to be when I'm 80, 90, 100? I don't want to call someone to get off the toilet. That's for darn sure. So I'm going to make sure I can do dips really well. Right.
I agree with that. Personal question for you. Who have been your mentors over the last many, many decades? You had mentioned a mentor, but is there anybody that we would know that we could,
one of my current mentors is also she's my life mentor, but also one of my best friends. So, and I remember I was at an event, And this woman came up and she goes, I'd like to have lunch with you. And I'm like, I'm kind of going, you want to have lunch with me? Okay. It was Mary Morrissey. I don't know if you know who she is. She has this company called the Brave Thinking Institute.
Okay.
She just wrote a book called Brave Thinking. She has an event called Dream Builder. She helps people, and a lot of people now, in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are like, I'm not doing what I want to do. How do I step into the next phase of my life and really build my dream career, find my dream relationship? So it's really finances, health, relationships, right? And so we got to be really good friends, but she also I don't know if she even knows she's doing it, but because she had the biggest non-denominational church in the country.
Wow.
And then moved into doing these things. And so it's like just who she is. Like we went to Israel with her right in February 2020 as everything was shutting down. And then we just did a Bali pilgrimage with her, and she's just amazing. Like she is a walking like earth angel, so she's my number one. I will tell you what I do is I seek out people who I call the wise elders. I think that what we do in our society is just, we miss out on so much. You look at the blue zones, and I think when you really look at why those places have the longevity, I believe that they've missed the point. I think it's not only do they move a lot, but they also stay relevant and are in community, and they matter.
Yeah.
In the United States, it seems like as you age, you stop mattering.
Yeah.
That you're not relevant, that no one cares. I seek out people older than me who have gone before me because they have so much wisdom. So I have some amazing friends like Sam Horn. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's another one who's just incredible. So I seek out women that are, 10, 20 years older than me. I hang out with the people who were part of the co-founders of EST. So, we're going to go see them in actually a couple days. So
Great.
I just have some amazing, cool friends that I consider to be mentors that are, 10 to 20 years older.
And they may not 10 to 20 years older, but I have no doubt that they probably look to you for that same mentorship. No doubt whatsoever.
I might nudge them a little bit on the health side.
I can see that. Can you share with my audience, as I wrap this up, what's next for you? You mentioned this big book. Maybe you can share how far along it is, when it will come out, where we can get it, where we can find you. Obviously, you're pretty easy to find on social media. Is there any other avenue? Talk about your podcast and stuff. Just let my audience know where they can get some more JJ Virgin.
Thank you. The podcast is Well Beyond 40. And then I also we're really focusing on YouTube.
Okay.
I'm loving YouTube. So we're actually doubling down on YouTube. We've been doing one video a week. We're going to go to 2. A lot of time commitment between podcasts and YouTube and Instagram. I've been doing a lot of Instagram reels too. Everything is focused around powerful aging and the real 3 pillars, the big rocks that do that, which for me is eating protein first and then lifting heavy things, but very specifically in a way to really focus on your fast twitch fibers and then sleep, of course. And so we actually created a protein calculator and a little 7-day protein challenge to help people get that going and track it. That's at jjvirgin.com/protein first. The book is February 2025. I know that's crazy. And the whole thing's outlined like in basically where we are agonizing right now. Like I was going to do Virgin Diet 2.0 and it was supposed to come out actually March 2024. And I just decided I didn't want to do it. It was all written. It's all done. I just didn't want to do it. So, because a book is like raising a child. And I'm like, I've already done that and I don't want to do it again. It's there. And so we've been spending our time here. The most important part of a book really is the introduction of the book. And so pretty much the rest of the book is done. The introduction, we keep going back and forth and back and forth. I have a writer who works with me because I speak and I speak it all. And then she takes that and she puts it on the book because I don't write in my voice. I speak in my voice. It's a very weird, bizarre thing. So So she has to take it so that it sounds like me in the written word. So I literally will I'll voice it all over to her so that she can then do it. Because if I'm talking, I'm fine.
Yeah. 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 And I don't know. I think that just allows you to feel more free.
Yeah. I don't like writing. I mean, that's the big joke. I actually was an English major at UCLA when I dropped out of the theater department. And they kicked me out when I was like, now I want to study nutrition. They're like, you have to leave, too many credits. But I just studied, I did English because I just didn't like writing. And I was like, I should do this. I still don't like writing. That's the big joke of it. But, there's plenty of different ways to do your messaging, and then someone else can write it. I love reading. I just don't like writing.
Don't like writing.
Nope, don't like writing.
JJ, this has been an absolute pleasure having you a guest on here. And I'm always so blown away by your expertise and how personable you are. You always are whenever I listen to you or hear you on a podcast, and especially including this one. You're so professional, but you're still, I just honestly felt like I just had coffee with a girlfriend. And me, I had black coffee. You might have had coffee with cream. I don't know.
No, I'm not a cream person.
No dairy.
I trained myself to like black coffee, but I will tell you, my fun little thing that I love is Living Ratio Cacao Calm, this like chocolate mushroom stuff, no sugar, amazing. So I will do one of those a day, and with a little frothed oat milk, and it's like my mocha treat. It's so good.
Those mushrooms are good for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with my audience. This has been exceeded my expectations by all levels. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as always, you guys, I hope you wake up feeling prepared and you go to bed feeling proud. Have a great day. Wow, we've reached the end. But before I leave you, I'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to me, your opinion does matter. So please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is Melissa McAllister. And until next time, thank you for being your own health advocate.